There are writers who inspire, writers who disturb, and then there are writers whose very existence feels like an act of violence. This is the story of a man whose words were considered so dangerous, so corrupting, that entire governments tried to erase him, that a man whose imagination was so extreme that his name itself became synonymous with cruelty. His name was Donatien Alphonse François, but the world knows him by a darker title, the Marquis de Sade. He is remembered as a monster, a philosopher, a criminal, a visionary, and a lunatic, all at once. Some called him the devil with a pen. Others believed he was the most brutally honest writer who ever lived, and whether people loved him, hated him, or tried to bury him in silence, no one who encountered his work ever walked away unchanged. Tonight, we open the forbidden pages, because to understand the most dangerous writer who ever lived, you must face the world he created. Part 1. The child of Violence Marquis de Sade was born in 1740 into one of France's oldest aristocratic families. From the moment he could breathe, he belonged to a world of masks, where cruelty was not a sin, but entertainment. He grew up in Versailles, in a time when kings played God and the nobles played predator. Executions were public celebrations. Torture was a political tool. Suffering was a spectacle. As a young boy, Sade had a tutor who beat him relentlessly, not for discipline, but for pleasure. Those early years shaped him. They carved dark corridors inside his mind, corridors he would later explore in his writing with terrifying honesty. He was raised among people who hid monstrous desires behind powdered wigs and silk gloves, and Sade learned one thing very early: human nature is far darker than society admits. He didn't invent cruelty. He simply exposed it. Part 2. The soldier who couldn't obey before becoming a writer. Sade was a soldier. He served in the 7 Years' War, where he saw real violence, the kind that rips minds apart. He fought bravely, but he hated authority. He refused to bow, refused to obey, refused to pretend. Even in the military, he was considered dangerous, not because he was violent, but because he questioned rules that others followed blindly. Sade didn't fear death. He feared boredom. He believed humans were animals, driven by desire, power, and instinct. And when the war ended, he carried that belief back to civilian life, where it would soon consume him. Part 3. The crimes that made a legend. Sade's life is often confused with the characters he wrote, but the truth is complicated. He was arrested several times for blasphemy, immorality, kidnapping as sexual misconduct, corrupting young women to possession of forbidden materials. But here is the part history rarely mentions. Many accusations were politically motivated. Some were fabricated, and others are still debated. However, Sade's personal life was unquestionably chaotic. He sought extreme experiences. He pushed limits without caring who objected. He lived by one philosophy: no morality is more important than my freedom. This idea terrified the French authorities, because if you allow a man to live without any restraint, you expose how fragile society really is. Part 4. The prisoner who couldn't be Marquis de Sade spent 32 years of his life in prisons and asylums. Not because of murder, not because of treason, but because of his writing. The government wanted him dead, forgotten, erased. But every time they locked him away, he did something worse. He wrote. Locked inside a cell in the Bastille, he created his most infamous work, a story so disturbing that even today it's considered one of the darkest novels ever written. 120 Days of Sodom. He wrote it on a single, continuous scroll of paper, 12 meters long. He hid it inside the cracks of his cell wall. He believed he would die before anyone read it. But the scroll survived, and so did his ideas inside that story. He described the worst impulses of humanity without flinching. It wasn't fantasy. It wasn't pornography. It was a dissected human soul, laid bare, bleeding, unfiltered. In the Bastille, his jailers feared him. One of them wrote, "This man is more dangerous with a pen than any criminal with a knife." Sade proved that no prison could truly cage a mind, and the French government would regret underestimating him. Part 5. The Revolution and the Madman. When the French Revolution erupted, fate played a twisted joke. The Marquis de Sade, the man who had been locked away by the aristocracy, was freed, but freedom came at a price. The revolution was more violent than anyone imagined. Heads rolled from guillotines every day, blood flooded the streets, and for once, Sade, the man associated with cruelty, was horrified. He begged the new government to stop the executions. He argued against capital punishment. He pleaded for mercy. People didn't know how to react. How could the most notorious writer of extreme cruelty become a voice for compassion? Sade's explanation was simple. When cruelty becomes political, it is no longer desire, it is tyranny. He believed in personal freedom, not state violence. But the revolution didn't care. Eventually, the new regime imprisoned him again, this time in the Charenton asylum, where he spent the last decade of his life. And there, behind barred windows, the dangerous writer continued to write and stage plays. Even madness couldn't stop him. Part 6. The philosophy that made him unforgivable was Sade so feared. Why did governments try to erase him? Why did his name become a warning? It wasn't just the sexual content. It wasn't the violence. It wasn't the scandal. It was something much deeper. Sade believed morality is an illusion. God does not exist. Humans are driven by appetite, not virtue. Power is the only true currency. Freedom means doing anything, no matter how taboo, if it does not kill you. This philosophy was more threatening than any crime he committed, because if Sade was right, then society itself is nothing but a fragile agreement held together by fear. He forced readers to confront a terrifying question. What would you do if no one was watching? If there were no consequences? If morality suddenly disappeared? Most people cannot face that question. Sade forced them to. Part 7. The writer who predicted the future. Here's the part history books rarely tell you. Sade wasn't just a perverse writer. He predicted modern psychology. He predicted political tyranny. He predicted the dangers of absolute power. He predicted the dark side of human desire. He exposed how cruelty can live inside any person, hidden, denied, but always waiting. Many modern thinkers, Freud, Nietzsche, Foucault, were influenced by him, even if they refused to admit it. And today, in the age of internet anonymity, extremism, voyeurism, and moral confusion, Sade's observations feel more accurate than ever. He didn't create darkness. He revealed it. Part 8. The books that terrified nations. His works were banned in France, England, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, Russia, United States. Even today, some countries forbid them. Justine, one of his novels, was burned publicly. Philosophy in the Bedroom was considered a threat to national morality, and 120 Days of Sodom was hidden for over a century. Why? Because Sade forced the world to look at the parts of itself it desperately wanted to ignore. His books were not meant to excite. They were meant to disturb. They were mirrors reflecting the monsters hiding inside society. And people hated him for it. Not because he lied, but because he told the truth too clearly. Part 9. The Final Years. A pen that refused TOD. In the asylum, Sade grew old, overweight, and nearly blind. But he never stopped writing. Even when doctors declared him insane. Even when guards confiscated his manuscripts. Even when they isolated him from the world, he still wrote. His final wish was chilling. He ordered his family to bury him in an unmarked grave, without ceremony, without a name. He wanted to disappear. But destiny refused. The world would not forget him. The world could not forget him, because his ideas had already escaped. Part 10. The legacy of a monster, a genius, and a truth. Today, the Marquis de Sade remains one of the most controversial figures in literary history. Some see him as a predator. Some see him as a philosopher. Some see him as a prophet. Some see him as a sick man who needed help. But one thing is undeniable. No writer has ever exposed the darkness of the human soul with such brutal honesty. He is the reason the word sadism exists that he reshaped. Philosophy, psychology, and literature. Writers, filmmakers, and artists still fear his influence. And yet, they borrow from him constantly. He is the most censored, most banned, most feared writer of all time. And that is exactly why he matters. Sade believed humans hide behind masks, that he ripped those masks off, that he believed morality is a performance, that he tore down the stage, that he believed truth is painful, that he forced us to feel it. Ending. The question Sade left for us in the end, Sade's greatest danger. Wasn't his life, it wasn't his crimes, it wasn't his books, it was the question he left behind. What are you capable of when no one can stop you? A question the world is still afraid to answer. Because deep down, Sade believed something horrifying. The monsters we fear most are not in his books. They are inside us. And that is why he remains the most dangerous writer who ever lived.